Okay. Yes, so you've come to the Canadian market here during a time of a great transition. So previously, we used to use this site here on the right called buyandsell.gc.ca. This was the authoritative site for all federal government tenders. We're transitioning to a new platform called Canada Buys. There's a number of reasons why we're doing this. One is because of the Canadian-Europe Free Trade Agreement, CETA, because Canada Buys is based on SAP Ariba, which I believe you probably use in your businesses. A lot of European businesses are using SAP Ariba. And so we are going to be using that, and all of our tenders will be posted electronically on this site. I say will be because we are in a transition. As you can imagine, there's with any transition, there's a period of change where it's where there will be speed bumps that we will run into. So I'll give you an idea of where we are right now, but in 2 weeks it's going to look different. Just like 2 weeks ago, it looked different. So I guess it's now about 3 weeks, we officially moved over from Buy and Sell to Canada Buys. So the search tool that was on the Buy and Sell website has been moved over to Canada Buys, and it's where you find all of the tenders. We're going to go through that and do a demonstration in a little bit. However, only about 20%, and this figure is probably out of date. It's probably more like 30 or 40% now, but a minority percentage of tenders are currently being posted on SAP Ariba. We're moving towards that, but not everybody has moved over. We have buyers across Canada in all of the regions and all of the provinces that are doing their procurements, and they're being pushed to get over to that electronic procurement solution. In the meantime, you'll see some tender opportunities that don't use SAP Ariba for their submission. They may use things like Canada Post's Connect service, which is a Canada Post, our postal service that does an electronic submission system. You may see that as the submission. It's possible to even see paper as a submission, because that used to be the case. All of the tenders that were active when we moved over were not updated. So you'll see all of these tenders that have just been moved over. And once those processes are complete, you'll see them fall off, and more processes will be posted via SAP Ariba. The good news
Jonathan, one question. Sorry, just are you transferring also the former tenders, or only the new one that are open and are going to expire in the upcoming months, or also the past tenders?
It's only the tenders that are open or were open on September, let's say 15th, whatever the date was. From then on, it's only those. So for the contract history,
because I made this fast search. First of all, my compliments for very fancy design. But if I put very generic lighting in the search tool without any filters, nothing, and let's say the first tender that is showing up is the one closed in 2018. Why?
Yeah, so the way that it works there is that there should be current and open tenders. The history, contract history, is actually on Buy and Sell. So there's another search that you can go, and I'll show you where it is to look at the contract history. Why there's one from 2018 that's coming on there, I'm not certain as to why. Maybe there is an update or an award related to that is more recent. But the idea is that everything from now on is going to be on Canada Buys. So if you find something that's awarded like this month or next month, it will be on Canada Buys. But if you're looking for the history, there is another. The old search is there on Buy and Sell to do contract history.
During the demo, during the demo, I will just ask you to type. Someone will see if you have the same search results as I did.
Yeah, we'll see. And there's definitely a few strange things happening with the search off and on. I've noticed it's changed. We're adding more, and things are being so for last week I put in a search, and all of a sudden I started to see municipal tenders. So like I'm getting City of Calgary and like all kinds of different bodies that were not there before. So now I found I have to filter by Canada or by the government of Canada in order to get government opportunities. So we'll have a look through that together. But for now, any searching that you're doing, I would be doing it for current tenders on Canada Buys, and for past tenders for doing your research on the old buy and sell search tool. Yes, so the submission method will be noted. All the postings are happening on Canada Buys in the search tool. It's the submission method that will be different. So if it's SAP Ariba, when you go into the tender, it'll say, here's a link to the opportunity in SAP Ariba, and you can go that way to submit. Or it'll say an alternative method for submission. So you don't have to look in multiple places to find current opportunities. There's one search to find all the current opportunities. It just depends on where they're being posted right now. But hopefully by next year or in the coming months, we'll see everything move over and we'll see all of our postings happening on Canada Buys. This is also to assist us with data collection. So previously, it was harder to collect data on all of the different businesses that we are purchasing from, Indigenous business, small, medium businesses, different groups. It's hard to keep track of our data. So with Canada Buys, we're inviting all businesses to complete their business profiles on Canada Buys when they register, and we can use that information to better track who are we purchasing from, and keeping that information and being able to report on it. Okay, so other information, so a lot of the procurement information, like the educational resources and the leaflets that we give out and things like that, that information has not been moved over to Canada Buys yet. So I'll show you when we do our demo, things like how to register, the policies, key contacts, our event calendar, and things like that are still all posted on Buy and Sell. Okay, the Government Electronic Tendering Service. This is the search tool that is found on Canada Buys. This is the official source for government tenders. So take a look at the branding. You mentioned that it was the fancy branding. She said she got the beaver up here. Keep an eye out for that. It's important because you want to know when you're on Canada Buys and when you're on SAP Ariba. Because there are different search tools. SAP Ariba is branded SAP Ariba. It doesn't look like Government of Canada. It says SAP up in the corner. This is important because if you're searching on SAP Ariba, you're only finding, like I said, about 20%, maybe a little bit more of the opportunities. You have to be searching on the Government Electronic Tender Service. And that's been a communication point that has been tricky for some folks. They come to me and they say, I'm looking in SAP and I am only finding a few opportunities. And it's because you're almost a step ahead. You have to step back, and it's on the Canada Buys site that need to be searching for opportunities. It's free site to use. You don't have to sign up for anything. You can create alerts with this site, which I'll show you how to do. But it's a public website and anybody around the world can access this site. Like I said, it's free, no registration required. You can use keywords. You can narrow down with by region, government agency, department, and things like that. You can save and your search and get notifications for it as well. The other place you can look for information is called open data, open government. So for all contracts that are over $10,000, Canada has to proactively disclose those. So there's a key part. You notice I said 10,000, but competitive procurement is only required for goods 25,000 and above, which means that there's a sweet spot there of about for goods that are from 10,000 to 25,000. You can find those through proactive disclosure. All those contracts are award. You won't find a tender opportunity, but you'll see an award for a contract for something like that. That can be helpful. You can do research to determine who is buying your goods in your field, which departments, how much are they spending, who are the competitors, what are the other businesses that are selling that good to the Government of Canada. And that open data can help a bit. For any contracts that are below 10,000, there is no proactive disclosure for that. So that's where the making connections bit is important. Okay, so I'm going to flip over here. I think I have to stop sharing for a moment in order to do this properly. stop sharing, and then I'm going to pop over to my web browser and we can look at the Canada Buys site here. Just one moment. You see that there now?
Yes.
Good. There I am, Jan. That's this is how it looks for me. GC directory, it's a little different, but that's my page.
I didn't end up finding you actually.
You did? Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm there. Excellent. So here's Canada Buys, canadabuys.canada.ca. You see our brand. Again, look for the branding to know if you're on Canada's site or SAP. We've got the Government of Canada logo here. Now there's two places you can go to find opportunities. You can either click on tender opportunities here, or you can click search tenders down here. Either one will take you to the correct place. So here we are. This is the search tool. This used to be on buyandsell.gc.ca. It's the same search tool. It's now live here. So here you're just getting all of everything. Right now we've got a blank search. So the only things we've got is everything active that's coming up. So there's different ways that you can filter this. You can do it with a keyword. You can put a keyword in for something. You were mentioning a keyword you wanted to put in there.
Lighting.
Lighting.
Let's see yeah, general lighting without any specifications.
Of 4,772 results.
You
so,
also have the one of 2018.
From, you mean this one here? Good.
Yeah.
Let's see what this is here. See, everything else is new. Oh, there's some that are older. Perhaps they're actually moving the contract history over here. This is good to see. Like I said, we're in a transition, so this is things are changing. Let's see what this says. Lighting equipment, publication closed. Yep. So it's giving you a historical information. As you saw in my presentation, we suggest people use the contract history page. I'm not sure that this is going to give you everything historic. Eventually, it's supposed to. Everything is supposed to be migrated over to here. So maybe we're seeing some of this older stuff here now. But what I would use, I'm going to show you here. If I was looking for contract history and you want to be sure that you're getting everything. Here on buy and sell, that search tool used to be right here on the main page, but it's gone. But if you go to procurement data, down here under contract history, this is the same search, it just looks different. This is what it used to look like, the old interface. Like if I put lighting in here, for example, 2008 for lighting, they're giving you different results, but this is giving you it's only searching contract history now. Yeah, so you're getting so really I would, if you're doing research on contract history, I would make sure to use this as well. It doesn't mean that what you're finding in here is not correct. I just don't know that it's picking up everything yet. It is supposed to. Eventually everything should be here. You should be able to see the history.
But can I exclude the contract history from the search?
Yes, you can.
Can I keep only the open or upcoming?
Yes.
Tenders?
So I'm going to do that. I was going to go through here the filters, so I'll do that now and I'll show you how to do that. So see, we've got lighting here and we've got filters we want to use. So the top filter is category. I don't use these because it's only going to narrow it down so much versus good or service. But if you were really interested in only a good or a service, you could narrow it that way. But I find it's good to leave that one open. Notice type, so you can go through the different types that we have. If you know that you're looking for a supply arrangement or a standing offer, you can narrow them down that way. But they'll tell you here in the what type of once you go in, what type of notice they are. So that's another way to narrow it down. But if you're looking for a commodity, you may be interested in standing offer, supply arrangements, requests for all of them. So that might not be one that you want to use. Status, this is the one you want here. So if you did open, that would, if we do that right now, for example, we're only going to get open opportunities. So here you've got this little filter here. If I click X, it'll go away, but that's my filter, open and lighting. So now you can see that 2018 one is gone because we're only dealing with open. But you'll notice over here, we've got Northern Lights College. That's not the federal government. NATO, we have NATO treaties, NATO opportunities. School district, that's certainly not the federal government. So this search tool is now pulling from all different governments that are coming into this search tool now. And that's the benefit of this, is that we're supposed to all be on the same platform someday. We're not there yet, but we're getting some of these opportunities. Now, if you want to, there's different ways to get rid of those. Is you can look by organization. If you organized it by organization, it would go by different federal departments that are there. But also,
How long they are staying open usually?
it depends. They all are different, and so it could be a month, it could be 2. It depends on how big the project is. Some of our really large construction projects are months and months and months that they sit there. Other ones may be quick. It depends on what they're buying and how quickly they need it. It'll never be like a day. It won't go on that it's so quick. There will be a process of at least a few weeks, but it's important to keep on top of this. And we're going to talk about that in a moment so that you don't have to come back here and search every time. For location, you can go in and you can put Canada. You can select different provinces within Canada, and you can even select cities within provinces. You have to put Canada now, or else you're going to get all of NATO. So because we're part of NATO, we get NATO opportunities that are here. So we may get opportunities for Italy here on our page as a NATO tender, but you don't want it. I mean, this is not what you're using this tool for. So if I were you, I would click Canada, and then you'll get those international ones.
Okay, and maybe does it include also like the tender opportunities of the government, but made, for example, for your facilities in Europe? Like embassies or universities that you manage in Europe? Okay.
Yes,
so it includes everything.
It does, and it depends on what department. So I actually have some experience working in that. If it's an embassy, it'll be Global Affairs Canada. And they changed their name. Their tenders will be listed under Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade, and something else, Department of Foreign Affairs, but they're now called Global Affairs Canada. So they would be in charge of all the embassies abroad. But another one you may be interested in, that most people probably won't tell you about, but I will, is Veterans Affairs Canada. So I worked for Veterans Affairs Canada in Europe, headquartered in Arras, France, because there is the Canadian War Memorials that are located in Europe. So we have a large presence there. We have a full office with war memorials at Vimy Ridge, Beaumont Hamel. In Italy, we have war graves in Italy, but that office, all the European operations of Veterans Affairs Canada are run out of that office in Arras in northern France, and there's a full office there. So that would be an exception of a European Canadian federal government office that's not run by Global Affairs. It's run by Veterans Affairs Canada. But again, those opportunities would be posted here. If Veterans Affairs said they needed, servicing at their
because
building there, it would be posted here.
This is also a small opportunity, a small part of this big piece of cake, let's say, but it's something that it will go through the federal tendering process. But it might be easier, to approach from the logistics point of view if the European company will supply for this, because, okay, we are here. I'm saying, for example, French company can provide they can answer to the lighting tender for this office or for some activities, and they have all the products in place. They have the customer service ready, so it's okay. It's also something to be considered.
Definitely, and it's a way to get in the door with the Canadian government for sure, because we're certainly not buying all of our goods and services from Canada and shipping them over to Europe. We contract a number of companies to maintain those facilities and type of stuff like that. So that would be something for sure to look into. Okay, so you could do location, you can do date if that's useful to you, and closing date as well. If you just want to look at the NATO tenders, you can look at NATO as well. Now,
sorry, but NATO tenders in Canada or NATO tenders in all the countries,
in the world,
members of NATO?
Exactly, we're all part of NATO, right? So well, not me because I'm not a business, but businesses in Canada can apply to tenders in Italy because we're both NATO members. And so because we are members of NATO, we are also able to bid on your tenders. It's reciprocal that way that we do that. For specifically for NATO tenders, and there are thresholds, there are trade agreements, there's other things that we can talk about with that, but for Canada, the reason you're seeing this specific here is because Canada is, in particular, is very underrepresented in NATO procurement. We are less than 1% of NATO procurement, but our population is more than that as part of NATO. So there's a deficit of Canadian companies participating in NATO. So one of the things that the Canadian government is trying to do is to promote those NATO tenders to Canadian business so that we get out there and we're more participating in NATO procurement. So that's why you see it there. It's really mostly for Canadian business to get out in the world and do business, just like you're trying to do here in Canada. So we're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. It's a win-win, because even for us in Europe, being part of NATO and us being part of NATO, that means it gives us the opportunity, an easier way to get indoors to the Canadian tenders through the NATO. Is that what you're trying to say?
It can be, but this NATO posting here is specifically for Canadian companies trying to get into the NATO postings. But it's the same for you. It's the same for you. If we have a big procurement that's posted via NATO for Canadian things, it'll be posted here so that you can see. But there's other. I mean, the NATO Supply and Procurement Agency is located in Luxembourg, and so they are the owners of their tenders. We're just reposting their tenders for them. This is us reposting NATO's tenders. NATO does the procurement themselves, but they want to procure from their member nations.
Okay.
I did another connection from me. My 2 years at the Coast Guard, I was working in NATO codification. So I worked with that office in Luxembourg. I have colleagues that work there in Luxembourg that does NATO codification. So Canada, for all of our military equipment or in equipment in general, we use NATO codification. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily relevant to you, but if there are NATO stock numbers out there for the equipment that you provide, that is an asset for the Canadian government. So we work with NATO stock numbers and we codify our material that way. So that is one consideration. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Jonathan, in the filters, I don't see any filter that will apply to RFP or bids in general that will be covered under CETA. Like there is no distinction between CETA and non-CETA, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's not here. And honestly, those trade agreement considerations are very complicated because we have a lot of trade agreements, and most of the trade agreement threshold information that you will see posted by Canada will be in relation to the Canada-Korea free trade agreement. And the reason why is because it's the lowest threshold. So our procurement policies are written in relation to our lowest threshold of our trade agreement that we have. So the lowest threshold that Canada has is the Canada-Korea free trade agreement. So you'll see that one posted a lot of time. That's why it's posted, is because it's 100,000, I believe, is the limit. But we don't go into that, and it's commodity by commodity as well, right? And so every trade agreement's different. You have to look into the trade agreement, see if your commodity is listed or not. And to be honest, I'm not a huge expert in that field, but they do apply at this point, but we don't distinguish them here on the search tool at all. So one other thing I'm going to do here is let's say we do a search here. We've got open for lighting. One that I do, I've got just for my own interest, just to give you an idea, is I do the Atlantic provinces. So I set up one because I'm here in Atlantic Canada. So I'll do Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and do that. Let's just do those three for now. Apply filters. So say I apply these filters, I do my search. And now I've got all open tenders in New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Nova Scotia. Great, good. I don't want to come back here and do this every day and look at this every day. I'd like for this to come to me. So you can follow this search. Click follow this search. Go here. You can pick email, or if you use RSS or Atom feeds, you can do that, but I do email. It'll show you here what the email notification you're creating. So I'm creating keyword lighting open in these 3 provinces. You put in your name and your email. Here you can create whatever title you want, just as an email subject line, and click create an email notification. I get one every morning. I don't have lighting on mine, but I have everything else. I have open for all, I have 4, I have Prince Edward Island 2, and I get an email every morning, and it has about 10 to 15 opportunities in it. So that's just for Atlantic Canada. If you did one for all of Canada, you would get more opportunities in it. Using the word lighting, that will limit things a lot, but it's also only going to use that keyword lighting. So what if it's light? What if it what if there are other words that are associated? So
this keyword is considering only the good or service, or also the name of the organization that is posting?
It's looking at every word in the posting. So it could just be
so we
everything.
Can have, okay, so we can have some company that has name in lighting. I don't know, some university that has some name in lighting, and they are tendering for something else, and we'll get the notice on this because it's the keyword. Okay, so it's better to be much more specific.
It does, but you'll be able to filter those out quickly. You'll see, because you're not going to get a notification every time one is posted. You'll get 1 email per day that'll just have all of them in a list. So you can just take 5 minutes of your day and say, okay, I'm going to look for this. And for me, you look through them and you get used to seeing how they look like, and you can go fairly quickly through to realize, okay, that's not relevant, and moving through. The keyword is going to search every document in there even. So it doesn't even be the name. It could be within that 10-page tender document. They used the word lighting once, unrelated, and it has nothing to do with lighting, but they just used that word for some reason. It's going to pick that up in the search, which is good and bad. It's bad because it's going to give you more searches, but it's good because it's going to help you with language, because different people use different words. In Canada, we're very regional. So some people here in Atlantic Canada, we call it the power. When the power goes out, the power goes out. But when you're in Ontario, it's the hydro, or the electricity goes out. And if you say the power went out, they kind of look at you like, oh, that's funny. So
and this is in English or also in French?
Les deux. Yep, English and French. You can.
So I can check the keywords in French.
Right now I'm in English. You can only do one at a time. So if you, on any Canadian government page you're on, there's always a Français button up here, and you click on that and it'll flip you over to French, exact what you're doing. But for this search, you search in English or you search in French. So I would create an alert for English. The thing is that it's all being translated, right? You're not going to find opportunities that are only posted in French. So you really don't have to look in 2 languages. If you look in English only, you're getting everything that way. If you want to create a search in French,
I just want to, because if I will put the word lighting in French, so it is éclairage or something similar, I will got in any case all the answers.
They're going to be the same, right?
If I will put the English word.
You should get the same.
Okay.
The only difference is we use translators, right? So some translators are going to use one word and others use others. I send things for translation. I get different things back every time. So yes, 95% you're going to get the same things. But if you're just picking up a keyword that's somewhere in a document, it's possible a translator might use a different word. And so you might not get exactly the same results, but they're going to be very similar, very, very similar results. So create that node, and you can create multiple. I can do this one here and say, great, and go back and do another one for Western Canada or for another commodity, or however many you want. You can have as many alerts set up. Some people just have a blank search. You just put nothing on there, just have open, and then set that to you, and then you're going to get everything that's posted, absolutely everything in Canada. If you're afraid that you're missing something, you can get absolutely everything every day. There's only so much posted every day. So if you look at everything that's posted every day, then you'll never miss anything. So that's another way, but it's more labor intensive to do that. But some people do like to do that. Okay, let's go back here. So we did filters, we did follow this search. Let's open one up here. Let's do this. Office furniture. This is a local one, just to show you a little bit what it looks like. So this is for office furniture in Dartmouth. It'll give you the time to closing. We got 4 hours till this one closes. Gives you the status, give you the date, closing date and time, and amendments. So amendment date, it's important to note amendments. For a lot of projects, there will be amendments that will be posted throughout the process. If you ask a question to the contracting officer, we'll talk about what that is in a moment, and an answer is given to you for information, that has to be publicly posted. It has to be fair for everyone. So if you go in and you say, oh, I noticed that this wasn't mentioned, and then they say, oh, you're right, here's the answer, that has to be publicly posted. So an amendment would be posted to the process to say, somebody asked this question, here's the answer that we provided. So here you see one, Amendment 2 is raised to modify the closing date and answer questions and to amend items under category 6. There you go, there's an example. And there was another amendment as well. So you'll find some general information. Here are the trade agreements that it is subject to based on the commodity. So this is a helpful thing to look at. So you were mentioning about CETA there, Jan. This is one place you can see if it's subject to CETA or not. It would be listed under trade agreements. And I suppose under keywords, if you were to put one of these trade agreements under the keyword, I assume it would give you the results, but you may find that a lot of them are applicable to CETA, so it would probably give you too many results. But that is a place you can look to see if this commodity is subject to a trade agreement. There's summary information over here. Contact information, this is important. So Procurement Assistance Canada is here to help you answer general questions and to give you help that way, but any specific questions related to a process has to go through the contracting authority that has been assigned the process. So in this case, this person, Naomi Gauthier, is the contracting authority for this. All questions related to this process have to go to Naomi, and she will answer the question. In this case, you'll notice that there's their email that I was mentioning. EC is Environment Canada. I think that was mentioned here at one point that this is for Environment Canada, the purchaser. So that information will be there. Also be the bidding details. So this is where your documents are. You start with the oldest. You notice that the date added. So go down to the oldest document. That would be your solicitation document. There it is in English, and there. Oh, that's French. English and French. That's the original. And then here are the amendments. Amendment 1 in English and French, and Amendment 2 in English and French. Oh, that didn't open. Oh, here we go. It's downloading it on me. So I'll just show, just for an example. There's your solicitation document. We'll talk about these a little bit in a bit, but this is long, a lot of information for this particular one. This is office furniture, and they're asking for very particular pieces. So it's very in depth, but my biggest piece of advice for you is if you're responding to one of these things is read every word in detail. There's no way around it. You have to absolutely make every requirement. If there's one where you're like, oh, we don't quite make this requirement, honestly, it may not be worth your time to bid because you have to make every mandatory requirement. And I don't want to sound mean to say don't waste your time. It's a helpful thing because you're busy, businesses are busy, and it's important to know that you do have to meet all mandatory requirements. And if you don't, you're going to be deemed non-responsive, as the language we use. So your first step is to read it in detail and make sure that that all mandatory requirements are applicable to you. Okay, so that's all of the documents. Gives you some information about eligibility and related notices. There are no related notices. So that's it gives you with the the bidding details here. You notice that there is no link to SAP Ariba here. This is an opportunity that's not on SAP Ariba that we're looking at right now. If it was under bidding detail, it would say, here is a link to SAP Ariba to bid, but there is none. So in the bidding documents, in that big long document I opened, there will be details of how you are going to bid to that, and you have to use that method. If it were SAP Ariba, like I said, there would be a link here to SAP Ariba, and it would say, follow this link to SAP Ariba to submit your bid, and you would use SAP Ariba to submit the bid.
Jonathan, if you
Yep.
can go on the contact information tab, please.
Yep.
So
Okay.
a couple of questions for you on that. So number one, is it typically the contact of the contracting authority or typically the contact of the person at Procurement Assistance Canada who's shared here?
No, it will always be the contracting authority. So this, it'll say contracting authority like this, and it will be this, because I can't help you with a specific process. It's like, it's not fair for me to help you. So I can tell you about processes in general, but as soon as we start talking about a specific process, it's kind of not my job to help you. It's the one contracting authority that has information about that. So like, I can help you find opportunities, set up searches, give you information about the process, but as soon as we're on a particular tender, the contracting authority is the go-to, and that will always be, there will always be a contracting authority listed. What will change is that here, the department that's making this purchase is Environment Canada. So this contracting authority works at Environment Canada. So they're a procurement officer who works at Environment Canada. If this process was being run by Public Services and Procurement Canada, then you would see the contracting authority would be listed as PSPC for a larger contract. But either way, the contracting authority is either with PSPC or the contracting authority is with the department who's doing the purchasing.
Yep. And then my question that lead from that is, I'm guessing that if they share the contracting authority contact information, it means that we can contact the people even during the whole process, even while the bid is open.
Yes, in fact, you're encouraged to contact them while the bid is open. So if you like, say we looked at this, you read through the documents and something was unclear to you, well, we would contact Naomi and ask her the answer. And then when the answer is given to you, it would be amended here. They would put out another notice and they would put 3 and they would say, somebody asked a question and here's the answer to that question. And it would appear here as amendment 3. And so yes, definitely contact the contracting authority during and after. If you lose, you don't get it, contact the contracting authority and ask them why you didn't win. They may debrief you and tell you, well, these are the reasons why you, they may or may not. It's up to them to determine and to give that information, but a lot of them will say, okay, well, this is some things to think about. Go ahead, Marta, I see your hand.
I have 2 questions. The first one is where we can find the list of goods and service identification numbers. So we can know that, for example, here the number 7110 is related to. So what exactly does it mean? Because I think it's differs a bit from the European nomenclature that we use.
Yes. Well, good news for you
yeah.
is you don't have to worry about this. So the reason this is here is because this is a process that was started before we transferred over and it was just moved over. So in the previously we used GSIN, which was Goods and Services Identification Number. But now that we're using SAP Ariba, we're moving to UNSPSC. So I assume you use UNSPSC as well. So for the ones that are on SAP Ariba, you'll start to see a section here that will list UNSPSC and then it'll have the UNSPSC codes.
Okay.
These will go away as soon as the ones that were open when we started, you'll start to see them disappear. You can't, there is a place here on buy and sell. I'll show it just for your reference. Under goods and services, this is where you can go for goods and service. So you can use it, but it's not going to be used going forward. It's very similar to UNSPSC. It's just a different classification system. That's all.
Okay, perfect. And the second question is how we can check if we are eligible for this kind of tender. So if there are any rules, if there are any system that we must register or go through to check the eligibility of us as contractor.
Couple places to look. First, there's eligibility terms and conditions. There may be information there about it, but really it's here, it's in the document. Like if there was any, like here it says the bidder must do this, the bidder must do this. All of the requirements would be listed in the document, and it's not going to be in one quick little easy place to find. You'd have to go through, look all of them, and to determine if you're eligible for this or not. It may be in a different place. This is a really long, complicated one we're looking at now. Some requests for proposals are 2 or 3 pages, and that's it, because it's a simple thing. This is a big complicated process. So the eligibility will be
Okay.
outlined within the solicitation document.
Okay, and this document includes also the list of documents, administrative, technical, financial offer that we have to, let's say, submit.
Yes,
For the,
yes,
okay.
exactly. Everything is going to be in, and like here are the first two original ones, like I said, that French and English. See, it's 35 pages. I don't know why that says 3, that's a typo. 35 pages in English. And then
There is the simplified
this is
procedure
sorry,
from
this
French.
is downloads. Sorry, this is downloads. It's not pages.
Okay.
Silly. Yeah, so there's English and there's French, and then so for this, if you were say you just became aware of this opportunity today and you were interested in it, first you would read through this entire document and make sure that everything in there you're compliant with it. Then after that, I would read this one and this one, because these are two amendments that have happened, and there could be supplemental information that has happened that would be of importance to you. So I think everything you need, all of that answers to all of those questions you asked would be located in those documents somewhere. It may be hard to find. You may have to kind of dig a little bit and determine, but because some of the requirements might be simple. It might say like you have to have 20% of your workforce is indigenous or something. Like, I don't know that it would say that, but if that was a requirement, it might say that, and you might know, well, right off the bat, we don't meet that requirement, and you would know to disregard. So that stuff will be located in the documents.
One thing I'd like to stress is you mentioned, Jonathan, that you have to read those bids in details and make sure that not only you understand, but meet all the requirements. But also, and I really want to insist on that, you really need, if there is a checklist of documents that you need to send with your answer, you need to make sure that list of documents is attached. I've experienced with one client that we definitively had the better bid, not only in terms of the equipment, but also in terms of the pricing. But they didn't attach a stupid administrative paper about company registration, I think it was. They just forget about it. They send everything. And when they opened the bid, that document was missing, and we were just disqualified right away. So yeah, I just want to stress on the fact that it's administratively heavy, and to be, because it has to be a fair process. If a paper is requested and it's not here, that's it for you. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Jonathan.
Yes, that is a very good point, Jan, and that is very, very common. In fact, it's on probably about 3 or 4 slides that I've got coming forward when you submit your bid is read everything, make sure it does everything. And even if it says like paginate the pages, make sure that thing says page 1, page 2, it depends. It might say put your company logo on every page. Make sure, and like these types of things are going to be less and less important as we do electronic submission on SAP. But no matter what the requirement is, it absolutely has to be that way. And if it's not, you're immediately disqualified. And we say non-responsive, because we've said here are the requirements. You have to meet these requirements. So it has to be fair. If somebody didn't meet one of those requirements, they have to be disqualified. And if they're not, if another company finds out that you won the bid and you were not responsible, they can complain. There's a tribunal in Canada where they can complain and say they did not meet the requirement and they were given the contract. So it's very, what Jan said is very important, and you do have to carefully follow all the instructions.
And Jonathan, when I see the languages, English and French, of course, shall I answer in both? So providing documents bilingual in providing the translations, or can I answer in one of these 2 languages?
It could be both. It depends. Every process
but
may
it can be in
different.
terms, I can answer in English only or only in French, or I have to provide documentation in both?
If it says that you have to, then yes. If it
Okay.
doesn't state that you have to, then you can do it in English only.
Okay.
The requirement would have to state, please provide this in English and French.
So it will be stated in the documentation, right? If I have to
Yes.
answer, okay, in both.
Exactly.
Languages.
And I think most times you probably wouldn't. It would only be for certain things. They may say, oh no, you're going to be installing this in the province of Quebec, and in Montreal, we need you to be bilingual. They're like, maybe there's a reason to do it both ways, but it would be well laid out exactly how you have to do it. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all I have for this demonstration portion. I just wanted to show you a bit the site, how it works, how to set up opportunity searches and things like that. I suggest you go and play with it. Do know, like I said, it is in transition. So you may see things change. You may see you do a search, and then you may see in a couple of weeks that the numbers go up, that there's more in the search that you did before. And it could be because we're adding more and more information into this new site as we go forward.
Jonathan, will you also show us how or if there is any supplier registration database
Yes.
that the European companies
Yep.
can use? Okay.
You're reading my mind. That's our next section.
Okay.
We're getting there. Back to our presentation. I'll show you a bit.
So what about we take that opportunities to take a 5-10 minutes break?
Yep.
Would be great.
It's what, 3:54 in some part of Europe. So let's reconnect in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Okay, see you soon.
Perfect.
See you
See you.
soon.
So 1 more minute, Jonathan, and we'll resume.
Okay, sounds good. I'll share my screen here.
Alberto, Marta, Barbara, are you guys here? Or?
Alberto is on a phone call and Mark is away. So we can start in a few minutes.
We have Federico,
Well,
Marisol.
we can start. We can
Okay.
go on.
Okay. All right, we'll resume into things here. Got lots more to cover, but I think I'm going to go a little bit quicker through some of the slides I have here. I think the heavy part was the information I shared with you this morning, but we'll go through a bit of what I've got left in terms of federal procurement for you today. Next topic, as Marta was asking us about, is registering as a supplier. So in order to do business with the Canadian government, you have to be registered as a supplier to supply to us. It's a simple process. You don't have to qualify in any regards, but you do have to have a Canadian business number. So you need to have you need to be registered with the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, and get a business number, your procurement business number. So we're not involved with getting that. You'd have to go through the Canada Revenue Agency to find out exactly how to obtain a procurement business number. But once you have that business number, you have all the information you need in order to be able to register as a supplier. So
and Jonathan, just to clarify, getting a supplier number does not mean that you have to incorporate in Canada.
Okay, I'm not sure.
No,
what are the
I'm
requirements
asking
to
you.
get a PBN? Oh, you're asking me? I'm not sure what the requirement to get a PBN in Canada is. You'd have to go through the CRA to ask them. I'm not sure if you have to be incorporated in Canada, but like we buy from businesses that are not incorporated in Canada,
Okay.
so I don't believe so. Like we buy materials, for example, that are not made in Canada at all, and so I don't believe that the foreign company would have to have presence. Of course, there are advantages of being set up here in Canada, but I think you can get a PBN as long as you're a business anywhere in the world. So as we talked about transition, we have two systems. So you still have to be registered in both places now in order to do business, because some of our opportunities are being posted via the old system and some are on SAP Ariba. So your first step is to get registered on Buy and Sell. You go on the Buy and Sell website. There are instructions of how to follow to register as a supplier. We call this SRI, the Supplier Registration Information. So it's back and forth a little bit. You put in your PBN number, it sends you an email, and there's a few steps that you follow to register, but it's a fairly quick process to get registered in the old Buy and Sell website. But now you have to be registered in Canada Buys in SAP Ariba. So you may have an SAP Ariba account already. If you do, you can link this into your Canada Buys profile so that your existing SAP Ariba account will be linked. The registration process is a little bit more involved for SAP Ariba. It asks you more questions, wants more information about your business. So my advice to you is to fill it out as much as you can. It's to a benefit of you. The more information that we have, it's to your benefit. So get registered in SAP Ariba as well. And then once you're registered in those two systems, you are now ready to submit a bid or to do low dollar value procurement. So if somebody's going to purchase from you directly, they still may want you to be registered as a supplier to the Government of Canada. Okay. So this is just to talk a little bit about transition to electronic procurement. I think we covered most of this already. So we're moving to Canada Buys electronic procurement solution. And related to that, this is a screenshot from Canada Buys that we were just on. The reason I'm highlighting this is because of the support team that's here. So I'm here to help you with information. However, I don't have access to your account. We don't have access to the information in behind the system. So if you need help with your account, signing up, all of that kind of stuff, there is a full team that's there to help you specifically with that. So you can call them, email with them, chat with them. There's resources as well to look online. But if you, for example, you have an SAP account, you're trying to link it, you can't figure out how to do that, use the support function on the page to help them, because they can actually manipulate your account and do things to it, whereas I don't have access to your system at all. So we would refer any questions regarding signing up or being a supplier to the Canada Buys support team. Okay, this is a section I made specifically for you folks to give you an idea related to some international considerations that we have to procurement. I hope you can read this. I kind of copied and pasted it into our slide. This is a Canadian content procurement nugget, as we call it, information nugget, which is there to help procurement officers in the work that they do. So I'm going to share the information that I have regarding to this. I can answer some of the questions, but I'm not a super expert in a lot of this stuff as well. So if we get any really specific questions, we may have to look into it further. But all is to say that any information related to a specific procurement is going to be posted on that procurement. So your eligibility, whether you are eligible to bid on a process, is going to be evident by reading through the solicitation documents. How that is worded and how that is presented to you may differ, but it should be clear about whether you can participate or not. So I'm going to just share a little bit of information about the Canadian content procurement nugget. So when procuring goods or services for a client department, when we say client department, we mean the clients to me. So that would be, Department of National Defence, Health Canada, Indigenous Services Canada, the departments that are doing the purchasing. So when procuring goods for them, contracting officers in my department are to determine if the Canadian content policy applies. The policy encourages industrial development in Canada by limiting, in specific circumstances, competition for government procurement opportunities to supplier of Canadian goods and services. So there are different categories here that the process can be listed as. So it can be, the Canadian content policy can be solely limited, so that it's only available to Canadian providers. They will do this most times when they believe that there are 2 or more suppliers in Canada that are providing that good or service. They will limit the contract to Canadian providers. There are exceptions that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but as a general rule, we will do conditionally limited. If we're not sure, we don't know how many suppliers there are of the good, we may say it's conditionally limited. Or it could be open when it's open for all suppliers. So you can, there's no certification that you need to provide. So these there's different processes related to determining this. The application, when do we apply this? It's not always applied. It's only applied sometimes. So that's an important thing about this Canadian content thing, is it's only sometimes applied. So when? So when the requirement is not subject to international trade agreements. So that would be one that would be key for you for the for CETA. How that plays out, I'm not sure. However, which goods are applicable to CETA are followed under CETA, which are not. That's going to matter based on the Canadian content policy application. Another one here that's important is this one here, when the estimated value of a competitive procurement is 25K or more. So this is for my department. We're applying this Canadian content policy. So this is for the large contracts, for contracts of $25,000 of goods, 40,000 for services and up. For departments that are buying these stuff directly, the Canadian content policy is not applied necessarily. I mean, it's up to them who they wish to purchase from. If they choose that themselves, they would like to apply their own Canadian content policy, that's up to them, but it's not mandatory to do that. So meaning there's an opportunity there for contracts that are $22,000, for example, directly to a client department. There may be no Canadian content policy applied to that. So that would be a consideration. So it says here only to PWGSC, that's my department. We used to be called Public Works and Government Services Canada. It's our legal name. That's why you still see that acronym, just to confuse you. And so PWGSC and D&D, that's the Department of National Defense. Defense has really high thresholds about what they can procure. That's different than the rest of the government. So this Canadian content policy is only applicable to D&D and to PWGSC. When other departments are doing their own contracting, they can choose to use a Canadian content policy, or they may not. So again, it's not always enforced. So for the eligibility, a good wholly manufactured or originated in Canada is considered a Canadian good. A product containing imported components may also be considered Canadian for the purpose of this policy when it has undergone sufficient change in Canada. That is an important note. So an example of this that I would have is that we buy many things for our vessels, our Coast Guard vessels that we buy from Europe. They come here, a Canadian shipyard modifies that thing so that it'll fit on a Canadian vessel. That is something that's now a Canadian good. Yes, we brought it from Europe, but we modified it here for our needs. So now it's a Canadian good. It has to have significant change, or sufficient change. So how that's determined, I'm not sure, but they may be asked to prove that. A service provided by an individual in Canada is considered a Canadian service. If you are employed here and you live here, you're a Canadian service now. Doesn't matter where you're from. If you're coming in from elsewhere to provide a service, 80% of the total service has to be Canadian. So you could have a workforce here of some, bring in a project engineer from elsewhere, that would still be considered a Canadian service. The reason I mention this is it is a common occurrence that people incorporate in Canada. Jan mentioned that, and there are many companies that will come and create a small office of a person or two. If you have a presence here in Canada, that office is a small business, a Canadian small business. And so that is a consideration. Where the goods come from is another. So I recognize that it's a further complication when you're talking about manufactured goods and bringing them into that office. But a service, for example, related to that good, that service is being provided by people who are here in Canada at a small Canadian office, subsidiary of your company. That is a Canadian small business with Canadian people working on it. So those are examples of ways that businesses approach this. My advice to you is look for creative ways to go around this as well. Partnering with Canadian business, Indigenous business, and other businesses are ways that you can work on towards doing business in Canada and being successful. So I'm showing this to you. This is a document that's prepared for procurement officers here in Canada to help us. But I just wanted to share with you to give you an idea of the market. Yes, we do try to buy Canadian when we can, but not always. And there are many opportunities where it is Canadian, it's value for our dollar to go elsewhere. So all is to say is you may hear of things that are limited to Canadian businesses, but it's not always the case. So it's a case by case. Keep your mind open and look at every process as a separate process. Every process is different.
And Jonathan, so how does that Canadian content translate into the platform you showed us before? Like, where can we see that it's the RFP is limited to Canadian content?
Sure, it will talk about the eligibility in those documents. So as I was mentioning to Marta there, it will be, the eligibility will be noted either in that section that says eligibility, right on the tender page, or within the documents itself. You may see the language used as open, conditionally limited, or solely limited. That might be the words that you would see. If it says it's open to anyone to bid, that would be what you're looking for. You're looking at to as an open bidder, as anybody can apply for that. And if it's not clear, you can ask the contracting authority. That would be a question. You can absolutely email them and say, is this open? Can I apply for this? If you didn't want to waste your time and you're not sure, ask them. They'll tell you right off, nope, this is going to be, and maybe they can give you insight. Sometimes the contracting authority will give you some background and they'll say, no, you know what, you're not applicable for this one. It's not for you. But I know that in the future, I've got a process coming up for X department and maybe it would be possible or something like that. So asking the question can't hurt. Okay. And I took this slide also for your consideration is the trade agreement thresholds affecting procurement. So we have to post notices for tenders. It's like we have all of these internal requirements I'm telling you about for $25,000 for goods and services and things like that. Those are Canadian requirements that we have under our own agreement. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement is a trade agreement between our own provinces because we have trade barriers within our own provinces. And so those are internal rules, but technically we must post procurements related to trade agreements and the thresholds that apply to those trade agreements. So I mentioned to you that you'll always see the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement listed because it's our lowest threshold. So for any goods or services over 100,000, we legally by those trade agreements have to post them for open tender. You might think, well, you already have the 25,000 for goods and 40 for services. Why does that matter? Well, because the Department of National Defense has much higher thresholds in the millions of dollars that defense can purchase directly, but they have to post that a bid. If they're doing a process over $100,000, they've got to put an RFP out there because of the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement. That's basically what that states. Okay, bidding on opportunities. So many Government of Canada contracts are awarded through a competitive process, which requires that you submit a bid. Requirements can be quite specific, so make sure you read your bid, read it closely, and that your bid meets all of them, and that you offer the best value for money. So we talked about that. To bid or not to bid. This is a big question, and it's not meant to be insulting to anybody. It's meant to position yourself and determine, should I put time and effort into this? Because it's hard. You put a lot of effort into it, and if you don't win a bid, you feel sometimes like you've wasted. That happens all the time. People lose bids all the time in government, and it's part of it, part of the process. So make sure that you read everything closely. Do you meet the evaluation criteria? Are you capable of offering the product or service? So capacity is important. Are you willing to accept all terms and conditions? This is an important one. There are many times when we'll get a bid and they'll say, okay, here's everything you need, but we're not willing to give you the intellectual property, or we're not willing to allow you to, give security screening for our employees, or we're not like, you don't get to set the terms, unfortunately. When you're doing the bid government procurement, you have to accept the terms that we put out there, and all of them, and there's no exception to that. Okay.
Jonathan,
yes, go ahead.
In the tendering documentation, do the authorities put also the payment modalities, how the tender will be paid off afterwards?
Yes.
So the company can already understand if they will get, I don't know, 50% anticipate, then 30, then at the end, or whatever.
Yes. And it's standard in Canada that we will not pay until the goods are received. So that's one thing we tell with business, is that sometimes you have to float the amount a little bit yourself, but the government has 30 days to pay you. After a good or a service has been rendered, the Canadian government will pay you within 30 days. That's our limit, but we will not pay you in advance. Until the good or the service is offered, there's no payment. So we have to accept the good, and it's somebody's job to accept the good and say, yes, this is the good as we agreed to. Once that happens, we have 30 days to pay you after that. That's how it works.
Oh, but if it's a longer contract, I don't know, it's like the construction contract that it's not only to delivering of the goods, but it's a service, for example. Is it still, does it still apply? So you pay at the end?
It could, it depends on, like, they may break it up. They might say, okay, this part of the service, you're going to come in and you're going to build a foundation or whatever you're going to do to the building, and we'll pay for it at, you know, X time once that service is delivered. That is possible, but normally it's one company or a joint venture that's winning a bid, and so we're saying, this is the project, we're going to pay you when the project's finished, unless it states within it, say we'll pay here, here, and here. But if it doesn't state, then it means at the end of the project. And but
it's always some indication in the documentation about the payment modalities.
Yes, there should be. And if there's not, you can ask the contracting authority, email the contracting authority, and they will give the information.
Jonathan, Mary has a question.
Oh, yes.
She's asking, how long in general does it take to know if you want a bid?
That's a great question. And again, it's going to vary quite a bit. It depends on how urgent the procurement is. And it also depends on capacity. So it changes. It may even change quite a bit depending on the time of year. So right now, for example, we're going into a very, very busy period for procurement people in Canada. We're getting to the end of fiscal year. And during the end of fiscal year, everybody wants to buy something with their budget. So there's this huge demand and things slow down. So you may notice that in March that it takes longer to find out because the procurement officers are very, very busy. So it may tell you in the process when you expect to find out, it may not. And in government, there could be steps that need to happen that aren't happening for a variety of reasons that could delay things. So there really isn't a general answer for you to give you. It could be very quick, or it could be a much longer time. It really has to do with the requirement, how urgently the requirement is needed, and the time of year. I would generally state that anything between January and April is going to take longer than any other the rest of the time of year. It would be a quicker process, I would say.
I have two questions for you, Jonathan.
Sure.
The first one is, you have in some instances when you answer to a bid, the obligation to put some money down. And let me explain. Let's say you're answering to a construction project, but then you won the bid and you end up saying, well, no, I'm not going to deliver because things have changed for me. I just won that big project in Spain, so I don't want to do that project in Canada anymore. So is there sometimes some instances where the federal government will ask the company to block some money in Canada until the project is completed as a guarantee that the company will deliver?
That's possible. They may. I haven't seen that in a tender myself, but it's possible they may ask to do that. I would state that we would enter into a contract probably right away. And if you're in a contract, it's good that those provisions are going to be in the contract. They're going to say, if you break this contract, it's going to cost you X amount of money. And so there would be a legal process to go after a company to pay a certain amount. So I would suggest that would be very different in every contract. But I think any contract signed would have details about payment, or what happens if one party were to not live up to its obligations, or things like that. To have money blocked off in Canada, I'm not sure if they would actually do that. We do have a preference of doing business with established businesses. So I think if they're picking your business and you're an established business, that might be enough to say, okay, well, we know that if something goes wrong, we know where we can pursue our money. But perhaps with certain projects, that's possible that they may do that. But I personally haven't seen that in a process. But that doesn't mean it's not the case. I've only been around so long, so that's possible.
And my other question for you've touched very briefly on the IP. I think it's a big subject. I think especially for people who maybe in the Lightning are bringing some solutions and developing some maybe software behind that Lightning, the management of the Lightning. Can you maybe address a little bit on the IP? I talked about it on Tuesday. I did ask people to be careful, very careful with that, and to make sure they understand if there is any transfer of IP when you work with the government, and also to do well, all the needed registration to make sure that the IP stay with you. So yeah, maybe if you can just address that,
Sure.
matter.
For most projects, you probably be able to keep the IT for most of, or the IP for most of it. It normally doesn't apply. I raised that a little bit because there are some programs where you're developing certain things. We have innovation programs in Canada where we give money and we support companies in developing the innovation that they're doing. And in some of those programs, like the Ideas program or Innovative Solutions Canada, there may be things that state that we keep the IP at the end, or that it could be that we have rights to the IP, but we're not commercializing the IP. Like you have the commercial rights to the IP, but maybe we have the right to do certain things to our to it here in Canada. For the most part, I don't think you would see anything related to IP when selling your goods. You're probably not going to be part of those innovation programs, most likely. So most likely it's probably not a much of a concern for you. But if there were an IP concern, it would be noted in the solicitation documents. They would note anything if there was any special consideration regarding the IP of your product. That it would be in there. And if that's something you're not comfortable with, and that would be a thing right off the bat to say, okay, I'm not, because like when we had that note that said you have to accept all of the terms and conditions. If the terms said that we had to take the IP at that point, then that's the terms. If you're not comfortable with those, then you would not bid. But I don't think that's the majority of the case. I don't think you would see that in most. It would just be a very few exceptions, maybe for a few particular projects where maybe IP would come into play. Okay. Right. And asking questions. We talked about this. There is the contracting authority for all questions. Keep moving here. Submitting your bid. I think most of this stuff is stuff we've gone over. Review your bid. Make sure to sign everywhere where it says there's a signature. Cross all your T's and dot all your I's. Make sure everything that they've asked for is there. That's good. Okay, so 5 steps. Here's 5, a good way to approach things. First, review everything. Review the document thoroughly. Make sure you're compliant with everything. Then you're going to decide whether you're going to bid or not. You start to collect information about your bid. Maybe do some research as to who others are in the field and what other and price points in Canada and what might be a competitive price. Prepare your bid document and submit your bid. So we're going to break those down a little bit here and go through them. So review the solicitation document. Every bid solicitation is unique, and so read it very carefully. Follow the instructions and read all the terms and conditions thoroughly. Skimming a solicitation document and missing out on one key requirement could result in a non-responsive bid, as we've talked about. Keep the deadline in mind. Make sure to answer all questions if there are any questions. I think that's everything. We've talked about that. So we're going to look briefly here.
Jonathan?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So let's say you are categorized as non-responsive. Do you get an information that explain why, or it just tells you that someone else won and you never get that information?
Yeah, you won't get it proactively. You can ask for it, and it'll be up to the contracting authority how much they decide to debrief you afterwards. You may get a good briefing from someone, but you'll just be declared non-responsive, likely, unless there could be a very proactive contracting authority who might say you're non-responsive because of X, but that might be, it depends. Okay, so we're going to overview here a solicitation document briefly. So there's a request for a standing offer there. There's going to be a section on general information at the beginning that sums things up and puts things into parts like that. There will be bidder instructions, so provides clear instructions, the clauses and conditions applicable to the solicitation document, and states that the bidder agrees to be bound by the clauses and conditions contained in all parts of the solicitation document. In this here, there could be mandatory bidders conferences and site visits. That is something that happens. They will have a site visit to do, say for a construction project. If it says that that site visit is mandatory, it's mandatory. You have to go to the site visit. So that may not apply to you in your sector, but point is that anything that's listed in there is mandatory.
And if it's mandatory, they sign who arrived. And then if the company is submitting the offer, they are checking if the
Yes,
company was present or not.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Definitely. I mean, those are only for specific ones. Ones that I'm thinking above are construction projects, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're going to say you're going to build a huge building for us, then you have to come to the site and look at the site
Yeah,
that
but
you're seeing before you tell us.
It's very common here also for
Yeah.
this. So, okay.
Yep. So yeah, they would do that.
But the question, Jonathan, on that is, especially for the companies that are in Europe, can you be represented at those on-site meetings? Like what? How do they decide if you were here as a company, or if you ask, for example, your agent, or if they will ask someone like me to go? Would that be okay as long as you represent the company?
As many answers I'll give to you today, it depends. It depends on what it says in the document. If it says you have to be present and you're unclear, you ask the contracting authority, and the contracting authority will either say, yes, you have to be there, or no, you can send a representative, or it could be different. Some of them may be very mandatory, and others, it may be more flexible. It depends on the real requirement. How much do we really need you to be there? Again, I think a lot of construction projects would probably be the big one that we would ask, but also potentially defense related things. If we're going to talk defense with certain people, then we might want them to be there specifically.
But if we are applying as joint venture, so the partnership, it's one representative can be enough representing the whole.
Maybe. Again, every process is different. So like I can't give you a yes or no, because one process may say yes, you can send a representative, and the next process might say no, you have to be there. It really
but if
depends
we
on
will
what.
make a question, they will answer us, and they will publish this answer publicly, let's say on the portal. Okay.
They'll publish the answer if the answer contains information that is not already out there. So if you ask a question and it's in the documents and you didn't catch it, they'll just answer it to you, and they may not post something. But if it's new information or information that they can't find somewhere, then they will post it. So yeah. Okay. Bid preparation. So this is, again, this is older information, things like page numeration or number of copies or things like that. This will be changing a lot once we move to electronic procurement, but still, whatever the requirements are, you follow those. There will be a section on evaluation procedures. I have a slide here coming up about different evaluation methods, but it'll describe it there in detail. It'll note any certifications. If you have to have certain certifications or membership in certain certification bodies or things like that will be noted here. Resulting contract clauses will include the clauses and conditions that will apply to a resulting contract. Will be all listed there. And in the annex, you will find the statement of work, which provides details on the requirement, sets out clearly and in detail the nature of the required good or service. It's kind of the narrative description of the work that's required. And then there's a few other annexes that can apply. Security requirements is one. We could talk a bit about security requirements coming up, but whichever requirements, some processes have none, other processes have more security requirements. Whatever the requirements are will be in detail in an annex. Non-disclosure agreement is possible. If it's applicable to a certain thing, there may be a non-disclosure agreement related to a process, particularly defense security related processes.
Jonathan, sorry, the signature, digital signature that is commonly used in Europe is also, let's say, how to say, recognized by Canadian authorities?
It may. Again, it depends. Through SAP Ariba, they're going to have their own system because it's meant to be electronically submitted. So SAP Ariba, you should be good to go. For the older systems, whatever the requirement that is listed will be listed there, whether you can do an electronic signature. We have electronic signatures in government that we use. Like if I sign a document, it puts my Government of Canada stamp on it. And so we're used to that. So I'm sure that would be fine. But whatever is required for a specific process will be listed exactly what you have to do. But we do work with electronic signatures. So I assume that for a lot of processes, that would be fine. Step 2, to bid or not to bid. So is your business capable? Do you meet the evaluation criteria, terms and conditions? Do you accept the pricing method? Should you partner with another supplier? These are questions that you would ask yourself as you're looking through the documents.
So, and Jonathan, on that, is there any room for negotiation or not? Meaning that, and I'm talking specifically about the terms and conditions.
No negotiation.
No negotiation.
I'll tell you right now, for terms and conditions, before you even continue, absolutely not. The Government of Canada sets its own terms and conditions and they're non-negotiable. For price, if it's a request for proposal, you're telling us what the price is. But if we were to do a low dollar value procurement with you, there could be some negotiation with price there. We might negotiate with you as to what the price might be. But terms and conditions, you don't get to contribute to that. It would be unfair if you got to set what a term or condition is. You're setting the terms, not the Canadian government, and it's unfair for another business. So it's whatever the government sets, those are your terms. And if you find yourself saying, yeah, but what if we do this, then you're going down the road of maybe you shouldn't bid for it because they're not going to bend. It won't bend for you.
So
yep.
This connects also to the typologies of procurement that you introduced. Do you have a practice to use that we call it in Europe like pre-commercial procurement? I don't know if you know what does it mean. It's something like the pre-commercial procurement is or innovation procurement. It uses different terminologies. It's engaging of the potential business suppliers in the tender preparation part to let's say acquire the knowledge of the service expertise that they can offer, and to structure the tender based on this, let's say, meetings or dialogue with the businesses. And then you put the tender and it's still open, but you acquire some additional knowledge thanks to this pre-commercial process that you carried out.
Yeah, we do that. We just call it something different, so I didn't recognize it. But what we would post is we would post what's called a request for information, an RFI, and it's in the same place, right on Canada Buys there. You'll see some now. It'll say request for information, and then it'll say what the information is. And the whole process is to just provide information to the government about whatever they may be looking for information. And it's exactly what you're saying. They'll seek information from business, and then they'll create a tender perhaps later or not based on the information that they get. And so, yeah, you're welcome to participate in any request for information out there as well. Okay. Know your competition. Those are good ones. A lot of this stuff we've talked about a little bit. Let's keep moving. Collect information.
Know your competition, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The history of contracts is the thing that can be useful for us here to see who won the tenders.
Correct. Exactly. So that's what I would suggest is use the contract history specifically and go in and find out what companies have been awarded contracts in your field. The price of the contracts and things like that. And it also tells you what departments are buying, right? It'll say this department purchased this. And so you can find lots of information that way about your competition.
And is there any possibility to search for the European companies who won the tenders? I don't know. It's just to have some statistics or to learn how, What is the
No,
chance?
I don't think you can filter the results by location. You'd have to look through but it would,
Okay.
the company name would be right there on the search. Like it would have on the
Yeah.
search results, the company name would be listed right there. And I think for a lot of them, the names are very obvious. Like the way European names are structured are a little bit different than Canadian businesses. So I think a lot of them, if you look through the list, you'd be able to tell
Because
fairly quickly.
by curiosity, when I was trying to make this kind of search on the buy and sell, I found it only but for the big defense contracts with some very famous Italian companies, for example, very big one that provides the defense services or products. So
Yep. Yep, there, it should be there. The contract history with it. You will find in some sectors there probably isn't a lot of dealing with, like for sectors where there is a lot of businesses in Canada offering that product, then we talked about that Canadian content procurement nugget. That is a reality for products where there are many Canadian companies offering that product. You will see the Canadian content applied for some of those.
Okay.
So there is times where they will not be open to you because what we've determined is there's sufficient competition here in Canada to give us best value for your dollar. So that is a consideration. But like I mentioned when we were talking about that, it's not all of them that policy is applied to. So even just doing your contract award history gives you some information, but it's not giving you everything. It's just kind of feeding to the information that you have to better inform yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a statistic, Jonathan, on the percentage of contracts that are awarded to non-Canadian company at the federal level?
I don't, and the reason why I probably don't is because we were not using electronic procurement. So this is the type of thing that we're hoping to be able to figure out when we have SAP Ariba, is to find out answers to questions exactly like yours. Right now in Canada, we have a 5% set aside for Indigenous business, but we can't keep track of all of the business we've done with Indigenous people. We have people out there buying Indigenous things right now, but it's not being tracked that way necessarily. There are ways to track it, but it's not being done that way. So electronic procurement is to help us answer those questions. So maybe in the future we will be able to have statistics about non-Canadian companies or groups and different companies from different groups. But until we move fully and we get everybody on electronic procurement, all kinds of different departments are using different procurement vehicles. Like they have their government credit card. If I go out there today and I buy gas in my government car and I go to an Indigenous gas station to fill up gas in that car, is that being tracked as an Indigenous procurement? I don't believe so. So that's an example of we need to collect that data. So now if I go out today and I buy from a European company on my government credit card, is that being tracked as a non-Canadian purchase? Probably not. So those are questions that maybe we will be able to answer in the future, but I don't have any stats regarding European businesses. I think it would vary greatly depending on what sector you're in, because I think in some sectors we're doing lots of purchasing international, and other sectors they're very well established here in Canada, and we're purchasing from Canadian companies. So it would depend sector by sector, I think. Okay, so we were talking about collecting info. That's similar. I want to get to some of the parts about your bid evaluation criteria. So I'm going to skip here a bit. This is telling you a bit about just to follow instructions. Honestly, these are slides upon slides that can be summarized to tell you is to read everything very carefully and follow the instructions. It's hard for us to go through a process with you or to show you a specific process or how a document works because they're so different every time. So that's really what a lot of our material is to read carefully and make sure, like here it's telling you, if it says to sign here, make sure to sign. Like there's the signature block on the first page, sign there. So things like that.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
So actually, do you provide a service where a company that's kind of new or European company goes to you and say, look, I've prepared that bid. Can you review it and make sure that we are compliant?
No, that wouldn't be fair. That's where it goes out of the fairness bit. And it's not about European companies, but anybody. If anybody comes to me in Canada and asks me to do that, that's a no. We stop at a particular tender. We help you to a particular tender, and now that you're at a particular tender, it's the contracting authority is the only person who you can speak to and can give information about a particular tender. So I can't look at your bid. I can't do any of that, unfortunately.